T. The double letter can be slightly pulsed like this, or it could slide. So again, sometimes when you're fingerspelling, I don't know what your names are. Normally I'd start with asking your names and show you. But since I have people at home that I won't be able to see because they're on the other side of this iPad, I can't do that. So basically you get to choose. Fingerspelling is like penmanship. Some of us write very neatly, and sometimes we write a little sloppy. So again, the only thing you're not going to do is you're not going to bounce the letters, because it'd be like skipping when you're speaking, right? It would be so hard to understand. So you're going to keep your hand as smooth as possible when you're executing the letters. And let's just say it was a double letter. You could pulse it or you can slide it. How do I know which hand to sign with? Now, there are signs. This is the sign for sign. This is the sign for fingerspell. How do you know which hand to use? Well, if I'm right-handed, I'm going to sign a one-handed sign with my dominant hand. If it's a double-handed sign, then sometimes the other hand, the non-dominant hand, is our passive hand. So when you're watching someone sign, who here's righty? And one lefty. So you can mirror image me, or someone signing on a computer. You guys would have to turn it around. What I mean by that is if I do teacher, everyone's going to sign it the same. But if I do student, now if you're right-handed, it's your right hand moving and your left hand is passive, whereas if you're lefty, it's going to be the opposite way. Why do I share this with you? Because it's important. Your brain understands it, but you're going to get into habits. So if you start fingerspelling with the non-dominant hand, it's going to be difficult to change that habit. And over time, when you're signing, if you confuse the hands, it's harder to read the signs. So it's a bad habit that I want you to prevent before you even learn it and do it. Okay, so that's that. What's the difference between a sign and a fingerspelled word? Fingerspelled words typically are our names, places, brand names, towns, things that don't have a sign. Everything else has a sign. So you're not going to fingerspell every word of every sentence you do. So for example, you'd be integrating the signs with the fingerspelling. So for example, my name, that's not fingerspelled, it's signs. My name is Kathy. So you'll be able to, hopefully by the end of tonight, introduce yourselves in sign language. That's one of our goals. Okay, and I think that, is sign language a universal language? Number one asked question, whether you're in high schools, colleges, or adult eds. No, sign language is not a universal language. It's not used in the whole entire world. And the same reasons that we don't have the same spoken languages in every single country is the same reason why they don't have sign language that's the same in every country. There's actually the same linguistical changes in language. For example, if anybody here live out of New York, if you ever lived in California, Florida, down south, they say words that we don't say, but they mean the same thing. If I said kicks back in the day, New York didn't say kicks, we said sneakers. I'd say tag or license plate, right? The different terms. So in sign language, that same nuance happens. So in New York, we tend to sign faster than down south, where they do things a little slower than us. Why? Way of life. So language is definitely part of our culture. So depending on where you live, depends on how you sign or speak that language. If you have any questions, I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you. Just stop me and ask. Before we even get into teaching signs, I want to show you some really, really great resources that you can use when you leave here. Of course, I want you to know the signs for my name, and I'm going to keep repeating it. And I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone, so I don't know if that's jolting the vocal on the other end. My apologies. But it's going to be something that if you forget, if you sign my name and you're trying to fingerspell your name and you forget, you're going to be able to go on your phones, which I don't see any out, which is so weird because I teach high school and I always have to say, can you put that away? You only have me for 30 minutes. So I'm going to ask, yep, Jessica, to click on whichever one she has. Okay, so this one's called the Asl App. This one is geared for iPhones or any, I guess it could be a Samsung, but you can literally have the app on your phone. So I have my phone here. Of course, without my glasses, it's hard to see. Asl App, and hopefully here it comes. Download and update now. I'll do that later. All right, so basically it is the ABC. Oh, it's not gonna let me load it, but I'll let you see it. So basically I have categories and you can pass it around. I don't know if we can scroll through the site. So this is basically the layout of it. So if you're home and you can't see my phone, so this is what it is. So you can click on different categories. Now the first 6 or 8 bundles on the app are free. The ABCs, some basic signs, more basic signs, colors, numbers. After that, it's a in-app purchase, which means 99 cents for a bundle. But if you buy them all together, then it's like one price, and no matter when they download new bundles, for example, we just had a lot of additional vocabulary dealing with transgender and gay rights. So now there's a whole new app category for all the terms that are now acceptable to use in both English and in sign language. Because again, even though they're using another language, they're still following the cultural shifts, and hopefully they're all for the better as we are, getting more evolved and open-minded. So then once you purchase it, I don't pay any more. The app just downloads a new category and I get to click on it for free. But again, $9.99 isn't expensive, but if you're trying to eat, it might be too expensive. And there are other free apps you can use, or you can just use the free ones at the beginning. All right, so that's the app. The next one was Signing Savvy. Yeah. Now, again, this is free. It has limited things you can do with it. But for example, you go home, can you type the word name in there? You go home, you say, oh my gosh, she taught me the sign for name. I can't remember it. Now hit find the sign and then just press play and it'll show you the sign. What's nice about that, right, is you get to type in like a dictionary. For free, I think they limit you to 5 a day. But then they also too have categories. So maybe you want to click on fingerspelling for me. And then, I don't know if there's a video of it. Maybe we can scroll down and see if we can hit the ABCs. Say a fingerspell. Yeah, try that. All right, so it's telling you can't do that, but don't worry because Google has everything for free, like YouTube stuff. But yeah, so the categories, I guess now they limit to just a purchase. Now this is a little more expensive because this is a yearly subscription. So unless you're really serious, just use the free app, the free parts of it. And then if you like it, then you could always invest. I think it's $49 for the year. But again, it has a lot of options for you if you are really serious about learning sign language. But the next slide, when we go back to my PowerPoint, thank you so much, Jessica. So now we're going to go back to we're finished with the resources. And now we're going to go down to the ASLU.
Yeah, that was using its own thing. Oh, were you touching it?
No.
Oh, so I was going to say, maybe
it's magic. I wish. I'm so used to the touch. I'm so spoiled with, the smart board. Oh, I can.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to. Click. There we go. All right, so now this has actually been one of my favorite finds. This is absolutely all for free. So I believe the first one, maybe we click on the life print and see what comes up. Now, this one, if you see over here, says ASL lessons, lesson 1. Click on it. They're going to make us see an ad. That's just how they get it to you for free. But listen, hey, if you're interested and you have a half an hour and you want to watch. All right, so now this is basically the whole lesson. So it's been so great while we went virtual. I can literally put this on my Google Classroom. I actually donate because it's not a paid site. He takes donations because this deaf man really wants people to learn how to communicate with people who can't hear. So he does this all for free and basically explains it. So if you go scroll, if we're not going to hit play, but I just want you to see it. If you had 42 minutes or 44 minutes, this is going to be the intro stuff. A lot of the stuff we're going to do tonight will be here. Hit play, you get to watch him do it. And then you scroll down and there'll be conversations. These are going to be all the vocabulary words that he goes over in that video. And let's just say you forget how to sign it, you can click on it and it'll take you right to that sign. There he is. So cool. And then if you scroll down, it gives you practicing, which is something that's important. Now you can do this with a friend who's in another country or another state, right? Because again, it's all online. And then if you scroll down, it's like 21 pages. This is all just lesson 1. It's just, and then you can watch a little story that he's doing. Again, you can be practicing and signing in the comfort of your own home for free. Can't beat that. I mean, the library is a great resource. It's an hour and a half. I'm able to share with you a lot of the stuff that I've had to find, but this is all wonderful resources that you have access to. So if we go back to the original screen and go back one more time, because I want you to see how many lessons there were. We go all the way up. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's too much to do both, right? Because I get sidetracked. So these are all the different lessons. Now, of course, you can do them in order, or you could be randomized and click on any of the lessons that looked interesting. Obviously, as you go, the more intense they'll get, and you'll add on the language. But this is all free. I can't find anything better to share with you other than being in person with somebody who is going to help you to stay on task. Other than that, it's self-explanatory. And again, I have a handout for you to take with all this information. So if you want to play around with it when you get home. Okay, we can go back to our PowerPoint. You're so good. All right, so now I have the little clicker. And again, there's ABCs, everything's on this. I can't tell you how much I love it. Okay, so now we're going to begin I'm going to dig into the language with you a little bit. I'm going to show you some of the things that I want you to learn, and then we'll have a little time to practice, and then I'll go over some of the more structural parts of the language that'll help you learn, just like knowing which hand to sign with. So if we can click on this little YouTube video, it's one of my favorites. This one is, again, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos for ABCs. This is just one I like because it shows it from different angles. All right, we could skip the ad.
Oh, this is the ad.
Thank you. This is the ad. It gets you every time. All right, so here it is. So this is the letter A. So if you want to do it with him, or if you feel easier to just watch him, the letter B. The letter C. D. Good. E. F. G. H. I. J. K. Good. That's okay. Yep. L. M. N. O. P. Q. R. S. T. U. V. W. X. Y. And Z. So can you just put this on pause for me, Jessica? Because I want to be able to replay it for you, but what I'm going to give you is what I call the old school handout, right? Just no 3D images here, not like a Harry Potter hologram could come out. But it does help you to review. For those of you who are online, I did email this if you would like a copy of it. I know there's a message on the iPad for some kind of.
Yeah, so I had a staff member logged in at home instead of in a.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know what. I don't know what that is. Okay. So when we look at this handout, the A looks the same. B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Notice the J is in motion, right? So that's moving downward. K,
Juice, isn't it?
it is the sign for juice. The J by itself is part of the language. Very good. J, K. Now, K becomes the first, maybe not the trickiest, but it's a placement of your finger. So again, if it's difficult, you just keep practicing it because it's a different hand shape. This is not a normal, like we do this and we'll do this. So this one is kind of the first one, I think, that isn't natural for our natural movements of our hands. So K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and then the next one that's moving is Z, and the Z is also like the J, right? It's not stationary. Now, this one happens to be my favorite handout for the alphabet because the perspective is correct. For example, the letter N, right? It's facing out. Some of the handouts, the hand doesn't face the right way, especially for G and H. Okay, our wrists aren't going to do that extra movement. The G and the H will be like this. So we're going to hit play on this because now I'm going to have you watch it and think about how you're going to fingerspell your name, not just your first name, but your last name. Okay, right all the way from the beginning. This way they can practice and they can kind of see their handout because they'll be using that at home. Here we go. All right, Jessica, put this on pause again for me. All right, so now let's just say you need to do that 100 more times, right? You just keep practicing it until you can do it without him doing it with you. But just take a look on the side. This is one YouTube video, and these are all the suggested websites. All free, you click on it, you watch a short little video, you hit skip ad, and then you have all of this explained. So let's just say you're having difficulties with whatever, you can click on a more explanation video to help you really understand it. Or if you get it, you move on to the next thing. Again, you can Google any of that, basic ASL, ASL online, and all this stuff will come up. So I'm going to give you a minute just to practice the letters from A to Z. If you want us to play the video, just let us know. And then ask me questions if you have a question about the letters. If you get the letters, I'm going to ask you to practice your names. Now, in old school, I'd come around and ask you to sign it with me, but I'm not going to put anyone on the pressure pot, especially if you're in the program. If you're at home, I can't even go home and see you signing. So it's really just the honor system. I'm going to practice your names. Again, remembering to keep your hand steady. So I'll show you what my name looks like. Okay, so I signed my name, K-A-T-H-Y. And when you're seeing the finger spelling, you'd actually be sounding out the letters rather than saying them like I just did. It would be K-A-F-I. And then my last name, B-Ed-K. Because then you're going to have to be able to read that finger spelling as well. So take a few minutes to practice your names. Please ask questions if you have any. And then we'll move on to the next thing in about 2 minutes. Oh, please do. I'm sorry, I can't do everything at once, people. I'm so glad you're at home enjoying your coffee with your feet up. It's kind of cool to be back in the library, though. I can't tell a lie.
I don't see any questions.
All right. That's all right. Of course, I still brought my ASL bingo, thinking we'd play a game, but it's hard to do that with people at home, so I'll have to be more.
How do you say last name?
Excellent. So depends on who you're signing with. The actual signs is my name and my last name. Now, some deaf people do not even, they'll do something like this, but for learning purposes, I'm going to teach you the most vocabulary to use so you can practice using it. So you'll sign my name, and then you finger spell your name, and then you sign last name, and then you'll finger spell your last name. So that question is excellent, but just know after we do this name thing, I'm actually going to shut my voice off and teach you that vocabulary with the PowerPoint. So at the end of that, you can ask any other additional questions. I hope I answered that. I hope. Yes, I did. All right, so practice your names. Let's see. Okay, so we're actually. Okay, so I did actually have this written so when I was doing it on virtual Zoom. So when you're finished practicing at home, you can sign done. I'm typing done rather, and I could see that 2 of the 3 people here have completed practicing. So I know that I could give you another few seconds and then we'll move on to the next slide. Wow, can we take our shoes off too?
Well, I was squeaking. People at home to hear squeak.
I couldn't hear any squeaking. Could you guys? No?
We got a couple of done in the chat.
Excellent. Good job. All right, do you guys have any questions, those of you in-house? Do you want to practice your names for me, or you want to just move on to the next thing? Anybody want to sign it to me? Go ahead, question.
You're saying it's the opposite way, like you put your right hand over.
So yes.
So I would do the opposite.
Yep, you would do it the opposite way. So if you're lefty,
Yeah.
righty, my right hand's on the top. Yes, my name. Excellent. Any other questions? Anybody want to sign their names? Okay, we'll move on to the next thing. That's fine. No pressure. I mean, there isn't any, although I don't bite because I know it's like the teacher wants me to sign. I just learned it. But again, if you wanted to, even if you wanted to do it after class, that's fine. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to shut my voice off and teach it to you the way I would do a lesson in school, or if you take it in college. You're just going to try and follow along. You're going to see me signing things. You're going to have no idea what I'm signing. But at the end of this, I'm hoping that these are the vocabulary words you can leave here with, and we're going to put them into some sentences for you to help you learn the vocabulary and have small little beginning conversations. Are you ready?
That I learned from video my son had for his kids.
Yep. Good night. So those are the vocabulary words we did. How'd you guys do? Right? So we don't use our voices. Questions for me based on what you saw me signing. Were you able to follow along? A little
I
bit.
was able to understand you, but to repeat them myself, I need practice.
Okay, and that's usually the case. The case would be that you can understand what I'm signing. There were signs that you clearly didn't know, but as we were adding them, you were going to see them again, right? You could almost tell what we're going to be doing. What's your name? Are you deaf? Right? Why are we asking that question? Because you're using sign language. So either you're learning sign, which you are. Now I was doing this. ASL is an abbreviation for American Sign Language. So usually if you're talking about learning, you do ASL, it's finger spelled ASL. Some people do sign. There's a lot of other signs for sign language, but I limited it to those two. And again, you get to choose. It depends on who you're signing with, whether I do ASL or sign. The high school kids get tested, right? So I'm a teacher, so now it gives them two options to answer the question correctly, right? So you remember the ASL part, or if you remember sign, and then sometimes they get really fancy and they're like, they're like, whoa, we're doing it, right? But again, we could have a little fun with it. So you see how the signs come together. Now, these are the vocabulary words that we were just doing. Would you like me to just repeat them over with my voice? See, now because we're hearing, we can use our first language to help us learn a second language. And it's really the only language you can actually speak two languages simultaneously. I can sign while I'm talking. It's not as clear as if I'm just signing by itself or talking by myself, but I can use both because of the mode. Can't do that with any other language because it's all spoken and you can't speak twice out of the same vocal cords. So the sign for again. Deaf culture is all about communication and understanding. So if somebody's signing something too quickly, you either tell them to slow down and sign it again, or maybe you just missed it, what was that again? Like, say that what? Like, because you can't believe what they're saying, the sign for again. And again, practicing another language, you just have to practice it again and again. You got to watch it, you got to use it, you got to practice it. The sign for day, because the phrase that I want you to know is signing, have a nice day. It's a nice thing to say when you're signing with somebody. So the sign for day, deaf, going from the ear to the mouth is the sign for deaf. So that's really after you, like if someone signs to you in introduction, you answer it like I have deaf family, so I'll sign my name. And then the second question I'll ask you is, are you deaf? Because if you are deaf, they're going to ask you a different set of introductory questions to kind of figure out who you are. But if you don't sign, are you deaf? Now, again, my eyebrows are going up. It's a yes, no question. Eyebrows up, the grammar's on the face. Then you would sign, no, I'm hearing, because that was the other sign I used. Or some people identify as hard of hearing. And it all depends. The term hearing impaired is no longer part of our vernacular in New York State. It was actually stopped. The word impaired is questionable for some people who are deaf. They don't think there's anything impaired about them. They just can't hear. So New York State now changed the language, I think, I want to say it was a year and a half ago. But so that's usually a term that if somebody identifies as hearing impaired, some high school or middle school students might want to be hearing. So they would take that, they would be the one that gives themselves the label, if that makes any sense. Generally speaking, deaf and hard of hearing are the accepted terms to use until the person clarifies it for you. So they might say, oh, no, I'm not deaf, I'm hard of hearing. Or they might say, I'm not hard of hearing, I'm deaf. And you say, okay, that's fine, however you identify. But those are the accepted terms. So the sign for fine, of course, I can change that to woman, right? Does that mean I'm really fine? The men in the room know, you got to be very careful with the word fine. So facial expressions are going to change the meaning of the sign. No, I'm fine, really, I'm fine. I'm happy to see you, I'm fine. Or, right? So again, you're going to be able to focus on the context of the facial expressions. Good night. Now, that one is a little bit harder because it's my right hand in motion. If I have my passive hand gone, it's good night. It's the same hand, good night. This hand is supporting it, so it's good night. So I'm righty, so if I turn my right hand around, it's good night. And for the lefties, it's their left hand, good night. It's the same hand. Think about if you're at a party and you're holding a cocktail of your choice. So it'd be good night. I got to go, but I'm not driving. Hard of hearing, we just went over. Have. Hearing, we already went over. Hello. There are 3 of them I showed you. I saw some of you repeating them, right? You can just wave. Hi. And then as I told the gentleman with the red shirt, I guess maybe he was a person who works at the library. And if you do it as you're leaving, it also means bye. It's in the context. You can wave. The formal sign for hello is this in American Sign Language, hello. I don't really use it. I use hi or what's up, but I didn't teach you what's up in that little thing, but hi. Typically how a lot of the younger deaf kids, they wave hi. How are you? There is no R in ASL, right? ASL is another language. It's going to drop out some of the articles. The context of the sentence is a little different. Our questions come at the end. So it's not what is your name. In ASL, it's you name what. The what's at the end. It's not unique to sign language that the question comes at the end. A lot of other languages put that kind of question at the end. So the R is in there because it just sounds better as how are you, but in ASL, you're really just signing how and pointing to the person you're asking. How are you? But that's just the way I say it. The sign for last. Now this guy did for last name. This also means like last test, like a final exam. But you'll see as you use certain terms, the signs may differ for the vocabulary. Later, that was this one, later. That's how I say goodbye to my students. All right, see you later. Bye, go, later. Right, so later, or waving bye. Learn. Now, I'm right-handed, so the right hand's coming up to my head, learn. Now, if you were to look on a site like Signing Savvy, they'll actually show you like maybe a book and you're taking the information and putting it in your head. That might be a way that you can memorize a term. And again, everyone's different. Some of the terms you can see, like if I did this, I wouldn't need to teach you that. What am I doing? I'm drinking, right? Because these are picture-like. It looks like exactly what it is, but most signs aren't like that. 30% of the language is like that. The rest of it is just arbitrary. There'd be no way to know what this meant, right? But if I did something like this, or I did something like this, most of you guys could figure out I said window and door, or banana, right? Or book. There are like picture-like signs that you can see. But something like learn, again, if that helps you, taking information from a book and putting it in your head to remember it, to learn something. The sign for student, which is over here because this is an alphabetical order, it's really the person who's learning. The sign is learner if you're going to translate specifically, but generally, depending on the term, we usually do use student, although now a lot of the New York State text, when they're talking about learners, that's exactly what they call them because it doesn't, I don't know, just what they do. Okay, me, pretty obvious, right? Not you, me. Now, if I'm looking over here and I'm pointing over there, it's he or she or it, because it doesn't have to be a person I'm pointing at. I could be pointing at the camera. Once my eye contact is with you, when I point outward, it becomes a pronoun. But if I'm looking at you, it's you and me. So eye gaze is very important in American Sign Language. That's what it's called when you're looking one way and talking about something else. So I said, who is that, right? Because I don't know if it's a she or he, right? And now we have to ask what pronouns they're going by because everyone has their own unique way. But either way, this is still the sign that you would point. And then I fingerspelled her name before, if you remember. Who is she? She works at the library, right? So now I'm identifying who she was so that if I was, maybe you want to go, who is that? Oh, he's cute. I want to know, maybe I can meet him, right? Now you're talking and trying to make up conversations. It's a sign for meet. One person, another person, and they meet. Okay, meet. We did name, but if you leave here and you don't know and remember the sign, then I'm not doing my job well. No, just kidding. If you forget it, obviously, you can Google it and you can find a way to sign name. Nice, nice. Now that's once, right? It's once through. Now, when you sign, and we're going to go over this just a little bit before the class ends, it really matters if you're repeating something versus doing it once. Some signs, it's not as different. Like if I do it once, it's nice. And if I do it more than once, it's clean. Washing something away. And you can see why it means that, in my opinion, right? If something is nice and then you keep doing it and you're like wiping it down, it becomes even nicer, right? Because it's clean. So it's important if the sign is done once or twice, it changes the meaning. If I change my hand palm orientation, I change it from name to sit. Now, I don't mean to do this to confuse anybody, but it's important to notice which way the hands are facing because you change one thing and you can change the complete meaning of the vocabulary. So nice. No. Now, obviously, I had nonverbals in there, right? Yes, no. Of course, the sign is no and yes. And then, of course, I didn't add in maybe, but that's usually the mom answer. And the kids ask you, maybe. Okay, so then we did library. So Patchogue-Medford Library. It's a wonderful library, although the parking is horrible now, but that's the whole side. See, different than watch. That's what I was doing for this poor man right here. I'm like, I'm watching you. I'm watching you at home too, but it matters, right? So it's see. So nice to see you. Like if I come back to the library and I saw you, it'd be nice to see you, as opposed to nice to meet you. Make sense? Slow down. Oh, I did sign already, but I skip it. If I skipped any, let me know. Sign. Slow down. I still use this with my deaf cousins. I'm like, whoa, slow it down, please. right? And even when kids talk, and even tonight, I'm talking fast because I want to give you so much information. Sometimes you have to just slow down a little bit, but that's the sign. Of course, we did student already. Student, teacher, taking information from my head and giving it to you. The verb to teach, the person who's doing the job. So let's just say we went to the library and we had to talk to someone at the reference desk. We talked to the librarian. Okay, so you're gonna put that person attached. But again, so it's teach, I teach ASL, I am a teacher. You guys are learning ASL, you are learners. Tired, kind of pretty much number one. How are you? Tired. We're all pretty tired, but we still have to muddle through with our coffee. What? You name? Who? Oh, I'm gonna sign with my right hand. Who? Of course, my mouth goes down because that's part of the sign, the facial expression. So that's usually that's a favorite sign. When I sign who, the high school kids laugh because I make that face. And then of course, yes. So those are our vocabulary words. Anyone you want to see again? There's gonna be a test at the end of this. No, just kidding. Just wanted to see if you were paying attention. No test. Okay, so let me just switch over to this. All right, because this is going to be me trying to help you understand the difference between the two languages. Now, ASL doesn't have a written form because, again, it's a manual language. It's a visual language. But when I'm trying to take my English, because I was born with English as my first language and sign language is my second language. Some deaf kids, it's the opposite. ASL is their first language and English is their second language. So they have a lot of difficulties. So this is how I break it down for the high school kids because I want them to be able to know what they're signing because English is their first language. So English, it says, what is your name? That's how we would say, right? What is your name? In ASL, these are the exact signs you're doing. You're going to point to the person you're talking to. You're going to sign the word name, and then you're going to put the word what in there, the sign what. And then your eyebrows are going to go down to show that it's a WH question. So this is what it looks like. Okay. Now, hopefully at this point, you can answer that question. So if I signed, you'd be able to fill in the blank with my name, and then you fingerspell that. English, what is your last name? In ASL, these are the signs. You, last name, what? And the eyebrows go down. And that's the nonverbal. And then you'd answer that. The English question, are you deaf? That's our yes, no question. In ASL, you're just pointing to the person and signing deaf, and your eyebrows are going to go up. Did I do this one? Was that one on that? This is where my brain goes. Oh, I skipped this one. And it's really one of the most important signs. That's why I just remembered why I missed it. So this is a very, very important sign in ASL. It means, oh, I see. It is a way of recognizing that you're understanding what people are sharing with you. Of course, when I stand here, I feel like I didn't do it because the light's on my eyes. But this sign could be all different expressions. So what's your name? You're going to fingerspell your name. And this is going to be my way of telling you I get it. And then I'll sign something like nice to meet you. If you're telling me something in sign language that's not positive or good, right? My face is going to be saying, really? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. Or, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. The face is going to tell you. So this version, have you guys ever been on the telephone and you're telling a story about work? Oh my God, you wouldn't believe what happened. I was doing this and you're just chatting away and then you hear nothing on the other end. What do we say? Are you still there? Are you listening? So what do we do when we're on the phone to let the other person know we're listening? We say, uh-huh, oh really? Uh-huh. We kind of give them vocal gestures that tell them that you're still following along. And if we don't hear them, how many times do we say, hey, are you listening? Right? Are you paying attention to me? So again, this is their version of that. So I'm remiss if I didn't sign it more than once on this slide, but I skipped over it. So let's come back to this side. I don't know why I jumped from this question. Oh, it's from the other room. I'm like, hello, there's a question. All right, so are you deaf? So you're gonna point, eyebrows go up. Okay, now we aren't deaf. Of course, now we're gonna be answering this question. No, I'm hearing. And this is gonna be the next question a deaf person will ask you. And this is truly a deaf introduction. If you're signing and they ask you what your name is, they'll ask you if you're deaf. And once you answer, no, I'm hearing, they'll ask you, are you learning ASL? So again, are you learning ASL? You learning ASL, eyebrows up. That's the question. Now, the reason they're asking you that is because if you are a CODA, a child of deaf adults, you'll say, no, my parents are deaf. And then it's going to be a whole different set of questions. But if you're really learning, you'll sign, yes, I'm learning, sign. And then the next question, they're going to ask you, who is teaching you? Because now they want to see if they know me. And that's going to be the question. You, ASL, teacher, who? And then you're going to finger spell my name or whoever's name. And then they're going to ask you if your ASL teacher is deaf. Because again, they're trying to narrow down the field. And I just brought up children of deaf adults. Those of you who have Apple TV, there's a show that Marley Matlin does on Apple TV called CODA. And it's the story of deaf parents with a hearing child who happens to be musical. It's really a very realistic look into a deaf family who uses a hearing child as an interpreter and the lifestyle of that child. It's very different than a normal childhood, whatever normal looks like these days. But if you have deaf adults as parents and you need to interpret for them at things you normally wouldn't have anything to do with, at 7 years old, you might be interpreting at the car dealership because the car broke down. And I was 7, I didn't even know what a carburetor was, but now you're interpreting it for your family so that you can be helpful in communications. They also take them to doctor's appointments, which is wonderful that they don't have to do that as much because the ADA law now does provide interpreters if there's one available, right? And that's the big thing, you're making reasonable accommodations. It doesn't mean that there's always an easy answer for that. So again, I digress to some of the things you can be interested in when you leave this class, and these are the signs. So do you want to practice these for a few minutes, or you want me to just go through them one more time? Or you want me to ask you questions and have you answer them? Don't do that to me, please. All right, I won't do that. But sign language classes usually are very interactive, and it's kind of fun because when you break through that fear of, I don't know how to do this, you kind of get to this new place of, wow, this could be a lot of fun. All right. So I'm going to keep talking to you about the language because obviously I'm trying to get you to understand. Now, we were just talking about changing the motion, changing the hand palm orientation, changes the meaning. So there are building blocks to every single sign. So the first one is hand shape, right? In this hand shape, what letter is this? It's an O. So you'd say the O hand shape to the B hand shape, right? So that would be the hand shapes. If we said the movement, it's going from the head outward, going down. Change the movement, changes the meaning. You teach me or I teach you. So the movement changes the meaning. Location. So a sign like this, change the location to here, you're changing the meaning of the sign. So the same palm orientation, the same hand shape, the only change is the location, and it goes from mom to dad. No, mom to dad. Yes, I had it. Good job. Obviously, you know the sign. So dad and mom, mom and dad. Do it together. Grandma and grandpa. Right. So now you change the movement. Everything else remains the same. And now you change the meaning from mom to grandma or from dad to grandpa. Palm orientations is which way the hands are facing. So I was showing you before, this is the sign for name. My palms are facing inward. If I change the palm orientation to down, every other component stays exactly the same except palm orientation. Now it's changed to sit. Or if I do it like this, it becomes egg. Sure, if I do name, you change it to this way, it becomes sit.
It becomes what?
Sit.
Sit.
To sit.
Sit. Okay.
Yep, to sit. And then if you do it this way, it's egg.
Egg?
Egg, as in like scrambled eggs,
Yeah.
right? So again, if I was to take two words that we know how to spell, if I spelled B-R-E-A-D, that would be bread. If I spelled B-E-A-D, that would be bead. Right? You take one little letter out, you change the meaning completely. This is the same concept, except when we say the word bread, the R is a sound. When we sign it, it's a different between location or palm orientation. So that's how it factors in as similar, but obviously different modes. Non-manual markers, there are lots of them. The most common one is facial expressions. Now, when you watch videos in sign language, you'll see eye gaze, which is different than facial expressions. There's also body language, if you tilt backwards or forwards, if you shift from left to right. All of it has meaning. But for now, we'll just consider it facial expressions. And of course, the biggest thing is context of a sign sentence. If I asked you to tell me what the meaning of run was in English, R-U-N, run. It could be physically running. It could be to run errands. It could be my car is running, my refrigerator, my nose, my pantyhose, right? So the context of how we use that one word changes in the context. The same thing with signs. Sometimes it's hard to see what the difference is unless you see it in a sentence. And that's going to be the big way you'd be able to see the differences between the signs. Does that make sense? Awesome. All right, let's see what else I have. Fingerspelling. Now, we're not going to be doing a lot of interactive stuff, but this is one of my favorite phrases to practice. After you get the ABCs, then you memorize it. A, B, C, F, G, H, J, K, L, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now, take them out of order, and now you have to find them in your brain, right? So you ever see a kid doing ABC order? They have to, where does F fit in? A, B, C, D, E, F. Oh, F, okay, F becomes A. You take it out of context, right? Now you have the letters scattered, and it changes the way we rotely memorize something to using it. So this is a fun expression to practice. So why don't you try and just copy my hand? I'll start it again. Everyone at home do it too. T, H, E. Good. Q, U, I, C. She's looking down. I did quick.
Yeah, if it's one letter, you have the one.
Q,
not present, I believe.
Q, U, I,
I.
C, K. So that was I. So the quick. Now we'll do brown. Good. Brown, box, F, O, X. Jumps. Of course, that'll look like I forgot what it was. Over. Good. The. Oh, of course. Lazy. Dog. All right, so that takes the ABCs out of order. So again, I think this is in the handout. We might remember this from typing class, right? That's how you learn the keys. So this is one of my favorites. Of course, I teach high school 1 year. This was probably a couple of years ago. They didn't believe me, so they actually had to like prove me to be. And I was like, you know what? I'm actually okay with that because instead of just following somebody, they wanted to verify it. So I was like, that's fun. But yeah, it's a fun thing to practice. Again, fingerspelling is probably the hardest thing to read in ASL. Okay, we were going to play bingo, but we're not going to do that. What else could I share with you about the language? It's fun to learn. It's very visual, and it's I don't know, I can't say enough about how much I love to use sign language and I love to teach it. There is so much awareness on ASL now. If you're watching TV and you see the commercials, who doesn't see sign language on every other commercial now because it's more about awareness. So that's pretty cool. Let me just go over to make sure I covered everything in the handouts. The other thing I actually didn't cover in the handout, because this is one of the sheets you're going to get, and that is when you are signing, you're expressing yourself in sign language, and when you're reading it, when I fingerspell, like I did this letter and said, what letter is this, right? You're going to be reading it. That's receptive. When you learn a second language, you have listening skills and speaking skills. In ASL, the speaking skill is the expressive skill, and the listening skill is the receptive skill. So I'm going to give this to you now so you can look at it. Those of you at home, if you'd like a handout, I did email it to the person who organized it so they can give you a digital copy. So here are some of the websites I listed. And here are the terms and the phrases. Of course, I have the same one over and over. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so that's all the stuff we covered tonight. And what I'd like to also do is just open it up to any kind of questions you might have about deaf culture, about sign language, signs you would like to learn. Because again, we can practice, I can teach you more vocabulary, but I don't know how much you're going to retain. So I'd rather use this time maybe to ask me questions. No? You're good? Question.
I know there's like false friends in like other languages where, you know, it sounds like a word and then it's very much not translated like that. Does ASL have anything similar to that?
Like, say that, ask me the question one more time so I can.
Words that, or I guess signs in this case, that I thought of this earlier, but I don't actually think it was really like common gestures that don't mean the same thing between common use and ASL.
Yes, yeah, there are gestures that don't have the same translation, and one of them is the middle finger, right? We commonly see that as a gesture that you would think is universal, but I was just discussing earlier that it's not a universal sign to mean FU, and it's like a regional sign in the United States. If you left the United States, they use a different handshape. In ASL, they recognize what you mean when you flip the bird to somebody, but they have a different sign for that particular vocabulary word. And there are several different ways depending on the context of what you're saying it about. Now, the word FUCK happens to be a word that has just a bunch of meanings. And so again, the bird that we know as a gesture isn't the same as the signs. I think that's kind of the vein in which you're asking the question.
Right, but I can't really think of like any good way to explain it. So basically the opposite of
Opposites.
You know, gestures in ASL that are used popularly but don't mean the same thing.
No, I don't think there is too many. I mean, I know, for example, like words like boing in English, it sounds like what it is. In ASL, they just have different like hand shapes, like they have like sign stories, but it's not the same.
What is like this? What is that sign again?
This one, have?
Yeah. I feel like that might kind of be what I'm thinking of, but I can't think of like what this is usually used for anyway.
Right. So this is the sign for have, but again, if we would use the sign for have and remember the sign for tired, right? We change the meaning by shifting it downward. And again, if I taught you animal, so again, they're all different meanings there, but it's not a general gesture that means something different in sign language. Doesn't happen. And question online?
Trying to ask a question, but I'm not really sure what it means, so maybe if you can ask it again. It says, is that similar to same, to the sign for same?
Same or same.
Okay.
Oh, this one, meaning maybe she was thinking of OIC, and then if I do it like this, it means same. So for example,
She said yes.
oh, I see, right? Oh, I see. Oh, you're wearing purple. Oh, I love purple. Me too, right? Now you're saying, oh, I see. And then you shift the hand shape to the palm orientation being instead of faced outward, it's faced to the side, and it changes the meaning. Now, again, it could be the two of us are the same or the two of you are the same. right? It's spatial because I'm not including myself in that sign. Any other questions?
Oh, I have a question.
Go
I
ahead.
still have that phone number. What's it called? The
To
TTY?
TTY.
How does that work?
So a TTY is a teletypewriter. Actually, it's almost outdated now because now there's video phones.
Okay.
But the concept of it was, remember the sound like fax machines make? So basically it was an old computer style thing and the TTY would go on it. So if you were deaf and you were communicating with someone else who was deaf, you would just communicate via the TTY because you both have one in your house. Where it changes is if I'm hearing and you're deaf and I don't have a TTY, you would now contact a call center. I don't think we ever called them call centers back in the day, but that's really what they were. So if I wanted to call someone who's deaf, I'd call this number. I think it's a 3-digit thing. You call it over and then they call the number you're trying to go and they become the interpreter between the conversations typing. Now, believe it or not, there are video chats because one of my girlfriends does that. She sits at home and she gets a video camera and then someone who's deaf who wants to communicate with someone else who's hearing now signs to the interpreter voices, and it acts much more realistically in real time than the TTY because deaf people are reading the words and not seeing the words. So yeah, so if you ever see on the commercials for anything, you'll usually see the TTY/TDD. They changed the term, like hearing impaired was not used and then it was used and then it was hard of hearing. TDD was them changing the term, but it's really TTY. So you'll see that, and there used to be places where you'd see a sign that says TTYs inside, like if you went to a rest stop. So if you were deaf, you could use that. So technology has changed because now everyone has their cell phones, which makes communication via hearing and deaf much more convenient because you're texting the vocabulary, and even with video chats, Skype or FaceTime. Any other questions?
I have more questions.
All right, please. I have others.
So we don't see a lot of deaf people in the workplace.
Okay.
So if we get a new colleague that's deaf, how can we make them feel welcome without it being awkward?
Excellent question. You know, every person who is deaf is different. So usually it's just getting to know them. I think just situationally understanding that these really interfere with communication a great deal. So they're very much a visual person. So if they're deaf, and I know there are, I want to say the library over by Locust or Ocean Avenue, there was actually a deaf intern there over the summer or right before COVID, and they had asked me to come in. But he was very oral, which means he did a lot of listening. He had hearing aids. One of the things we don't ask, I see someone with glasses, right? We don't say, what kind of prescription is that, right? We never ask that question. So if you see someone who's deaf, they might not be profoundly deaf. There are different, you know, grades of hearing loss, like there's different versions of vision loss. So if I'm moderate to mildly deaf, that's hard of hearing. That's most of our older generation, because the more you live, the more damage you do. And one of the only parts of our body that doesn't regenerate, right, are nerves and our hearing. If I get a cut like I have, it's going to heal itself. My hearing doesn't. So over time, we're all going to lose our hearing to some degree, just like we lose some of our other abilities. But unfortunately for the younger generation who only knows those AirPods, they're going to go hard of hearing much sooner, but that's a whole nother topic. So back to how you interact with people who are deaf. So basically the first thing you would ask them was, what is the easiest way for us to communicate with you? And then they'll be as honest, I just need you to look at me. I can hear you pretty well. I have my hearing aids. Or some people might say, I'm deaf in one ear and I'm hearing in the other. So just please talk on my left side versus my right side. Are you raising your hand?
Right hand.
Right.
Right here is almost there.
Right. So then if I was to sit right over here, it would be much easier for you to follow the conversation. So again, that simple question is,
I had a friend that kept moving around, so he'd be on my left side, he kept moving with me. I said, what you do?
so you guys have to sit back to back and just scream into the good ear. But again, I mean, I think we have to get to the point where being inquisitive without being insulting, right? Ignorance is different than stupidity, in my opinion, right? If you don't know how to communicate with somebody, It's a huge difference, right? Ignorance is you don't know. So please help me so I can be a better colleague to you. That we could say to anybody, right? But of course, if someone has a language change, whether they're hard of hearing, or even if they had visual issues, what would be the easiest way for us to set up this environment for you? Again, it's empowering to include them in the discussion as opposed to saying, oh, we have to deal with him. What do you mean he can't hear out of his left ear? Oh, right? And that's the exclusion part. The inclusion part is please help us understand. And the truth is that if someone said that to you, like, listen, I see you wearing glasses, but their reflection is hurting my eyes. Like, we'd have a conversation about it. It wouldn't be like, I can't believe you take off those glasses, right? That's the rudeness. And I think the more evolved we get, the more inclusive we can become, because I think I personally, the older I get, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And that if you say to somebody, I really want to be respectful of your culture, please help me understand what I need to know. They're very happy to share it with you. Again, I have this new transgender population who I am exposed to. I don't mean to sound rude to them. And I'm going to say the same thing about people who don't understand deafness. I say, I don't understand how I know what pronoun you go by. Well, just ask. Oh, okay. So now one of the questions I ask my new students is, nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Betka. I go by she. Please introduce yourself and tell me what pronoun you use. Now, some kids look at you like, what are you doing? But a lot of them, especially those who are transgender, who identify as a he, even though physically you look like a she, it's not up to me, right? So again, if you ask someone who's deaf, what's the best way to communicate? They're going to share with you, thank you for caring. Please talk to this side, it's easier. Like this light for someone who is deaf would be very distracting because you can't see. So knowing where the shadows are, like this would be a much better way to communicate than having that light. So if you have an open window where there's a light coming in, that wouldn't be a good seat for someone who is deaf. So again, this applies to the classroom as well. If you have family or friends who have deaf children or deaf students in the classroom, even colleges, you'll see so many deaf students entering the college. And again, you would just want to be aware of where they're sitting, where the noises are, making sure they can see the board. Any other questions?
We have no questions
Okay.
from the audience at home.
That's okay. So then what I'm going to leave you with in the last few minutes is all the things you can do to learn more about deaf culture and about sign language. Netflix has ASL University. It's, I have to go back to him. He's one of my heartthrobs. Love this guy. This guy right here. His name is Niall DeMarco. Does anybody know him? Oh, you should. Go home and Google him. He's one of my favorites. And the reason he's one of my favorites is he is one of 25 deaf members of his family. He comes from a genetically deaf family. So he has a couple of TED Talks, if you're a TED Talks person, but he and Marlee Matlin, most people do know who Marlee Matlin is. She played in so many, like West Wing and Reasonable Doubt. She's been in movies. Children of the Lesser God was like her debut in the Hollywood scenes, but she's been in lots and lots of movies. The two of them, him particularly, he comes from a deaf family. So he just only knows deaf culture. He won Dancing with the Stars. He's profoundly deaf. So before I start to touch on the different hearing losses, so mild and moderate, you can probably have conversations. When you start to get to like profound and severe, you can't hear any voices, like the remember that like audiology bar, like it almost looks like a banana. Certain letters, like it falls into a different sound range. So there's different frequencies, like a dog whistle. Most people can get the concept. If you blow a dog whistle, none of us could hear it, but the dogs go crazy because their hearing has a different threshold. So he's profoundly deaf, but he doesn't give up. So he not only won America's Top Model, but then he won Dancing with the Stars. I want to see this man dance. I have two left feet. I can hear the music. I can't do it. He is amazing. And he basically says he just doesn't give up. He doesn't look at the world as I can't. He looks at the word like, yes, I can. And when you want to do something, you do it. And he's very open about it. He came out as gender fluid, which is another thing that was very interesting because now his big campaign is to help equality for all people, regardless of a label. I'm a deaf man who's also gender fluid, which means he wakes up in the morning and decides what it is he's attracted to, and then he just goes with his emotion. And it takes a little bit of getting used to, but he now advocates for all these different groups. And he's just like, it's amazing. So now he's getting into the cinema world, and he produced the Deaf University, which is about Gallaudet University. If you don't know what Gallaudet is, it's the only liberal arts college for the deaf in the United States, and maybe even the world, but I don't know for sure. I'd have to Google that. I think it's the whole entire world. And these deaf kids go there, and now they're almost discriminating against themselves because he'd be considered an elite deaf because he was born to deaf family. And those students who were born with hearing families are less than. So it's the dynamic within this culture that is so intense, but I watched it, and even as someone who knows about the culture, couldn't imagine how difficult life could be for these young people who are using cochlear implants. For those of you who may know what it basically is a surgery that allows you to bypass the nerve in your ear and go right to the brain, or the cochlear part, the nerve. Cochlear implants. The FDA approved it back in the early to mid 80s, and then recently just approved the bilateral, both sides, because we know that sound is surrounding. So there are deaf schools and the deaf colleges, and again, there's a whole different structure of whether you're deaf, born deaf, go deaf, how much English you learn, how much ASL you know. It's fascinating, that one particularly. There's also a show called This Close. It's on the Sundance station. It's about 230-something deaf people and how they live, and all in sign language, which is fun because it's captioned, but you get a taste of what it's like to watch TV and not really be able to follow the words because you have to read it, right? If you're deaf, you're watching it, it's all in sign language. Switched at Birth is one that the high school kids used to watch. It's about, a family getting to know two kids that were accidentally switched. There's so many movies if you're interested in deaf culture, even just sign language that use sign language in them. No Ordinary Hero was turned on to me a couple of years ago with a woman who was deaf at a different library, and she loves the movie. And it's really about bullying within the deaf and the hearing worlds, like as in kids. I'm trying to think of other stuff. Oh, of course, there's The Quiet Place, which is completely random, but it has nothing to do with deaf culture. It has to do with the survival of people because one of the girls is deaf. And what's happening in Hollywood is they're actually choosing deaf actors and actresses to play the roles of the deaf people. And that seems so logical, right? But in history, they actually teach a hearing person to sign and act deaf. So the deaf world.
There's some of the old movies where I see that, and there are so many things wrong with that.
So many things wrong with it. And so what happened was, it was like, why don't you just pick a deaf person to play the role? But someone like Marlee Matlin, someone like Niall DeMarco changes the landscape and how we look at it. And they start to give us grassroots or different looks into the deaf world. Coda is the newer one. It's on Apple TV, and it really is like so real and raw that I loved it because it was really a genuine look into the world. Children of a Lesser God back in the day was very inspirational, but it's a little dated at this point, right? Deaf people are integrating into the world the way we are, and I think it's wonderful that libraries like this offer sign language classes for people to learn, and the internet has so many resources. So on the handouts, I show you some of the more reliable ones. Gallaudet may not be on there, but there's if you're interested in interpreting, there's the RIT, the Registry for Interpreters for the Deaf, and other sites. And again, NAD, National Association of the Deaf. If you have any questions about sign language, those are the places to go for the real accurate information, because this day and age, you can get commentary, you can get research-based, and some of these bigger places, you'll get the research-backed research on deafness, cochlear implant, sign language, and all the debates within the world. So with that, I want to thank you. If there are no questions, I'm so happy that I got to teach you guys some sign language. I'm excited that I was able to be in the library to do it. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I hope to see you signing in the future. All right.